You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today, on our 400th episode, we're discussing a special topic, Star Trek, What Might Have Been. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, stick around to the end of the show. We do actually have some feedback from some of our recent discussions on Starfleet Academy. But for now, I want to actually encourage you to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you can hit the bell to get notifications and you can watch us in video. If you're just joining us after 400 episodes, don't worry, there's plenty of Star Trek in the future for this show. And so what are we doing here? Every 50 or 100 episodes, I think we've settled into every 100 episodes, we'll have a special episode where we discuss a special topic. And this time, Father, you came up with the idea of discussing the sort of what might have been in Star Trek storylines or character arcs that got left by the wayside, shall we say, throughout the various series. Most of our discussion today is going to center around classic Trek. Not so much, hasn't been enough time in new Trek to really leave us some openings like that.
Oh no, there are too many openings on how to how to do new Trek differently.
Well, there's that, yes. So this isn't. You might have thought, if you're a longtime Star Trek fan, we were going to talk about like the Lost series from the 70s, the various attempts to start up Star Trek again. That may be a discussion for another time. But for now, we're going to be talking about the classic series and the loose threads that got left behind. So with that, why don't we jump right into it and start with the original series? Now, as I thought about it, I didn't have. I maybe should have thought longer, but I didn't come up with anything specific for myself from the original series. But Father, did you have any things you wanted?
I did, and it was difficult for me to think of something on the original series as well, because it's a very good series overall, and in many ways kind of wraps up a lot of things, or some things are just so wide open that there's kind of no intention to follow up on. But one that I always kind of wish we would have seen some follow up of was the episode The Enterprise Incident, where they steal a Romulan cloaking device, and we never hear later what happens. Why does the Federation not reverse engineer this and add it to Starfleet ships? Is it because they're not able to do so technically? Is there some technical challenge, some safety issue that they're not able to overcome? Or is there a diplomatic situation? By the Next Generation, we hear about this Treaty of Algernon, where there's been some agreement between the Federation and the Romulans that the Federation won't develop cloaking technology. Why the Federation agreed to that, it's never really clear, because it's a pretty big concession. But the fact that they steal the cloaking device, but then, it just sort of gets forgotten about, it seems. I always thought that was a loose end that could have been pursued more.
Father, that's an interesting point you bring up, and now I think I understand why I didn't come up with anything for the original series, because so many of these loose threads got dealt with in the books that Simon & Schuster put out under their Pocket Books imprint that I read voraciously when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s. And there was a follow-up in those books, which was darn good, actually. It was a pretty good follow-up. There were some good writers back then for writing for Star Trek. But you're right. I would have loved to have gotten something in between the Enterprise Incident and whatever you got in Next Gen, explaining some of what happens with the cloaking device. It's too good of a MacGuffin to have let by the wayside in the original series. Good. Jimmy, what do you have for the original series?
Well, initially, I didn't have any for the original series because it's not as mythology bound as later Star Trek, and so there's less to explore. They also were doing it more by the seat of their pants than any of the other series, and so it doesn't lend itself to easy extrapolation, but without just duplicating what they did in later series. But I thought about it, and there are some things I would do differently with it. I would try to introduce more Federation and human history into it. Like maybe a time travel episode to a period that's still in our future. I would explore the structure of the Federation a little bit more and EarthGov and stuff like that. On a personal level, I would have included more family members besides those of Kirk and Spock. We do get other family members for Kirk and Spock. You know, we get George Kirk and we get Spock's parents. But I would have liked to explore the family members of Uhura and Sulu and Scotty and Chekhov and so forth. In particular, I would have introduced a character that they actually planned to introduce, which was McCoy's daughter, Joanna.
Right.
She was mentioned in the series Bible for the original series. She was originally thought to be maybe a love interest for Kirk, although they later decided he'd be a little too old for her. So they changed her name and turned her into Irina Gallium as a girlfriend for Chekhov in the disastrous episode The Way to Eden. And she was mentioned by name, so she is canon. She was mentioned in the animated series episode The Survivor. But I would have gotten her on screen. I would have explored what happened. Is McCoy a widower? Is he divorcee? You know, I would have gone into all that. I also have a good solution for the fact that they turned her into Irina Gallium in The Way to Eden, because my second thought for the original series is let's kill specific episodes to make Star Trek better. So out goes the alternative factor, out goes, which is just incoherent, out goes Operation Annihilate because it's too gross, out goes the Omega Glory because it's too preachy, out goes Spock's brain because it's Spock's brain, which apparently it was meant as parody, but it didn't come off that way. I mean, if they want to try a second swing at it and make it parody, that would be fine with me. Out goes The Children Shall Lead because it's so terrible. And out goes The Way to Eden because it's so cringe. So no more Irina Gallium. I also would, and this is kind of obvious, but I would give it its full 5 seasons. You know, it was meant as a 5-year mission, and it could have been that. It was not the ratings that killed Star Trek. It was Gene Roddenberry, because he was so difficult to work with. He was such a jerk to the network that he killed more than one season. You know, Gene Roddenberry is famous for Star Trek, but before Star Trek, he had another series called The Lieutenant, and he was so committed to his ideology and I'm going to do things my way that he ruined and killed The Lieutenant after one season. And then he managed to get Star Trek, and they didn't want, and they worked with him, and he was just as difficult. And frankly, the series could have gotten its full 5 years if it hadn't been for Gene Roddenberry. So I would remove Gene Roddenberry from the equation and let it at some point and let it get its full 5 years.
Yeah, since we're speculating, it's interesting to consider what would have happened to Star Trek in the future if it hadn't had that abrupt end, because that abrupt end is kind of the seed of the fandom that eventually brought about the movie and then more series after that. I wonder if it would have continued like Doctor Who, just keep going with that momentum, or if it would have killed it. Hey, we've completed 5 seasons. That's the end of the series. And thanks, everyone.
It depends on how they ended it. If they gave it a real ending, it probably would have been the end. Yeah. If they didn't, which was frequent in television at the time, then it could have gotten further extensions.
Toward the end, they could have talked about concluding the 5-year mission, but, some new mission that was coming up or something, that they could have alluded to, even without defining necessarily, would have left open some space for further development.
And the motion picture kind of implied that they did complete the 5-year mission, and then Kirk got promoted and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's really just the animated series, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. Actually, I while you were talking, I actually came up with one for the original series. Is Gary Seven and from Assignment Earth. We kind of get some more of that, and I'll go more into that later with one of my other mentions from the TNG era. But getting the supervisors and the Gary Seven's mission on Earth that as we know, Jimmy, we've talked about before, and I don't know if Father was with us when we did. It was supposed to be a sort of backdoor pilot for an American version of Doctor Who, which would have been an interesting idea to do out of a Star Trek universe. So that is a storyline, a character that got introduced and never got its fulfillment. Would have been interesting to see where that would have went. So excellent. So
where that would have gone.
Sorry, my
yeah. It's not where no man has went before.
This is this is my Boston dialect probably coming out. So the next series we're going to talk about, and I think I'm the only one who has anything for this one, is the animated series. And the one I wanted to mention here was something that we just talked about, which was the slaver weapon and the slaver race, and the Kazin to go with it, sort of the all interconnected there, because I thought they were a fascinating idea. This ancient race, we kind of get the in TNG we get the progenitor race that created all the humanoid in the galaxy. That is
not them from Larry Niven's mythology,
right? But it would be interesting to have had the slavers, their civilization, their influence come up again, as well as have the Kazin be more. And I get it, you can't really do Kazin in a live action until very recently, not in a believable way. But it's an interesting idea to think about.
And just to add a little additional interest to that, so at least the way Larry Niven envisioned the slavers, they don't actually call them by their name in the episode, but they're called the Tenuktipan. And they are reptilian, they're short, and they're stocky, and they are not that smart. Because if you can, the reason they were the slavers is they had a mental power that would let them dominate those around them. And if you can mind control the people around you, you don't need to be that smart. And so there was no evolution. They had risen to be the alpha species in their own planetary ecosystem. And that took evolutionary pressure off of them. So they didn't need to develop robust intelligence. They had just enough to control other people. And that's what led they were the Threnton. The Tenuktipan were their primary slave race that was eventually their undoing, because the Tenuktipan were much smarter. And that's enabled them to work around their not so intelligent masters and eventually launch the war against them.
Interesting. Okay.
And then they killed everybody.
right. Yeah, to start from scratch.
They built one super weapon that would mind control the whole galaxy, and everybody committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
Also, while we're on the animated series, I have one change that I would make to the animated series. As long as I'm in an episode killing mood, and I would kill the Magic Zemeckis too.
Yeah. That one was...
I don't even remember that one at all.
It's the one with the devil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We've that's one we've talked about already. Yeah. All right. So moving on from the animated series to TNG, Father, it's back to you. Do you have anything you want to change?
For TNG, I really like it overall. One thing, that was a loose end that we could have seen a little more of, I think, would have been the character of Commander Shelby. We get her for the best of both worlds. Why not bring her back every now and then as a recurring character, maybe as first officer on another ship later, perhaps continuing to be Starfleet's expert on the Borg when they have other Borg encounters in the future, that even if it's only a subspace communication or whatever, because we have that tension between her and Riker there in Best of Both Worlds. But then Riker names her first officer, and they seem to work very well together in that capacity. Could there have been something explored about how they, interact later as peers, basically, and other possibilities there with that particular character? We finally see her in what is it, Star Trek Picard? Yeah.
Season 3.
Season 3, yeah, Season 3 of Star Trek Picard, when they were bringing back a lot of people from Next Generation, but. There's really never even a mention of her again in the rest of Next Generation.
I like your idea of having her back as, within the existing series, but we actually almost saw way more of her than we actually did, because at the end of season 3, when they wrote The Best of Both Worlds, Patrick Stewart was in contract negotiations. They did not know if he was going to come back. And so Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is written as a possible exit point for the Captain Picard character. And that's why they brought Shelby in. Riker would have moved up to be captain for the rest of the series, and Shelby would have been first officer for the rest of the series. And then Patrick Stewart decided to stay, and we went back to the status quo.
Yeah.
Again, it's just interesting to think about how that would have changed the series with Riker as captain.
Oh my gosh!
I think they would have smoothed out some of his rougher edges as he moves into the captain's chair.
Almost certainly. Yeah.
They probably also would have addressed his hypocrisy, because now it's like Shelby's going to be telling him you can't go on away missions. He's like, I'm going anyway.
Yeah, they sort of dropped that for Picard a lot too. Eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. Jimmy, what about you? Just to TNG?
Father may have more for TNG.
Do you have any?
Oh no, that was really the main one. I mean, there are obviously other little things. I mean, if you want to drop episodes, you got that clip episode for sure, and a number of others that are not even popping into my mind at the moment.
Angel 1.
But, Angel 1. There you go.
And that early one where the Code of Honor
Code of Honor. Oh my gosh, yeah. So.
You shall have no Lieutenant Yar and no vaccine. Oh, man.
Yeah. It's interesting. I loved, what they did with bringing Yar back with yesterday's Enterprise, and terms of giving her an honorable exit. And
Skin of Evil, that's the one she died in.
That Skin of Evil's when she died. That's right. Yeah. And so they give her a better way to end things there with yesterday's Enterprise. Beyond that, even somebody like Tomalak that we see a little bit in season 3, he's in 2 or 3 episodes. He feels like he was there more than that.
Yeah.
And, maybe he could have been. That would have been another interesting too.
Yeah. I was just thinking of some more that I would add or so, but I'll hold that until after. Jimmy, what do you have for TNG?
Well, my thoughts for TNG, I don't have a lot on this series. I have more for some later series. But for this series, my thoughts principally center on Data and his family. I like that they're all played by Brent Spiner. I like that. That's good. Yes. But I would severely rewrite Lore and the Crystalline Entity. I would either... I would add way more about the Crystalline Entity or delete it entirely, because as it is, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Why would Lore cooperate with this thing?
Right.
And so I would either explore it much further or get rid of it altogether. And I'd also tweak Lore in some ways, because I don't think they fully got him right as Data's evil twin. I also would modify Data. I would either exploit his memories of the colonists, because he's allegedly gotten the memories of all those colonists on the planet he was found in his mind, and they mention it like once or twice and then do nothing with it. But there's loads of possibilities there if he's got those memories. Like how about, sudden expertise in things is a minor point, but you've got plot potential with, like, what if some of those alternate personalities start activating? What if a relative of one of those people who died learns that he's got their memories and wants to come and have him do a seance for him, let him talk to their departed relative. There's all kinds of stuff you could do with that. So I would either exploit that or get rid of it entirely.
Right.
Which is effectively the way they run Data on the show, is he acts like he doesn't have those memories. I also would modify a few of the mannerisms or a few of the smaller ways they handle Data. I would continue to let him not use contractions, but I would never point it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as if you don't point out that he doesn't use contractions, people will notice that Data speaks in a kind of formal way. But at the minute you point it out, they're going to zero in on that and notice every mistake Brent Spiner makes.
Yeah.
And so I would say, okay, nice thing. He doesn't use contractions, but never mention the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would make him much less awkward. And I would take some of the stuff, which actually, like, they had that Measure of the Man episode, which gave us the marvelous line, Data is a toaster. Yeah. A lot of that stuff really should have been dealt with. If he's a second in command of a Galaxy class starship, a lot of his stuff should have been dealt with earlier. And he shouldn't constantly be, oh, you were making a joke. I suddenly understand now. I mean, that's just dumb. After he's been in Starfleet for 26 years, he's gonna have encountered humans enough to get the sense of when they're using humor and stuff, and not have to do the constant looking up of words in his internal database and stuff.
Yeah, sometimes I almost wondered whether his previous 20 plus years in Starfleet were like, working alone. His captain always had him off in a corner somewhere calculating stuff or whatever, like not interacting with people to learn these things.
Yeah, but then how does he rise through the ranks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, that is the they really wanted to other Data, like to make him feel other than us, besides just how he looked. And so I get why they did it, but it just created all these problems that eventually they kind of, again, over time, they kind of just moved away from those things and just kind of let, he didn't do as much looking up the meaning of words at the end of the series and that sort of stuff.
By the way, while we're talking about what might have been on Star Trek, when they originally, I saw an interview with Brent Spiner where he talked about this, and he said that he initially thought his character's name was going to be Data, because that was the standard American pronunciation of that word. Yeah. And so he thought, okay, I'm Mr. Data, which I always thought was a terrible name anyway, but at least I did, I'm used to it now, but not when he was first introduced.
Right.
And then on the first day of rehearsals, in waltzes Patrick Stewart with his British accent, and suddenly it's Mr. Data. and that radically changed the way everyone pronounces his name.
Until season 2, when Pulaski comes aboard.
Yeah.
And he corrects her. Yeah. All right. Any other ones, Jimmy?
Not for TNG.
Okay, I got a few. I got some things I want to tell you people about. So the obvious one is TNG conspiracy in the invasion that never happened.
Yeah. They dropped the ball.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would have been good, but it is clearly was set up for some big arc that they were going to do and never did. And I feel like you should have at least closed the loop on it. That would have been something. But
there was, I think, some relationship to the Borg that they introduced, but they never made it clear, and it's not the kind of thing you would find obvious in hindsight.
And I feel like in DS9 with the founders, it kind of was a similar idea where you have basically replacements of people. In one case, it's the Goa'uld taking over from inside, which is what it was, a conspiracy. And in DS9, it was shapeshifters taking the place of people. So I feel like they kind of sometimes in DS9 they kind of were going back and filling in some of these gaps. So there's that one from Conspiracy. I also felt like I would have loved to have seen more of Captain Morgan Bateson and Bozeman that came forward in time. Kelsey Grammer that came forward in time through the time rift, and being people out of time, which is essentially what we got with Discovery being set 1,000 years in the future. But at least this was only 80 something years. But what happens to the, and I know in secondary media, there are books and that sort of stuff that explore this.
And in Lower Decks.
Right. We did get Bateson back in Lower Decks. So I think it was an interesting character and an interesting ship, crew, etc. that would have been to see how they were displaced, how they dealt with a different, 80 years different Federation. And
what would have really been interesting is if we would have found out that somewhere on that ship was also Jillian, what's her name, the scientist
Whale
from
doctor.
Star Trek for the whale doctor, yeah.
Dr.
She would have had a second displacement in time
from the Citation Institute. Man, she's just jumping through time. She's just, what did they call the like back in the old days? Where the people who were bad luck on ships? That would be her.
Jinxes?
No, there was this particular word like albatross or whatever. Yeah, but sort of the similar thing. Throw her overboard. So there's that one, and then another one that I thought would be something that was sort of developed was the Travelers when Wesley goes off. And this is why I kind of mentioned with Gary 7, we kind of in Prodigy, we get this merger of the Travelers and the supervisors of Gary 7's time into this race.
Conglomerate.
It's not really a race. It's an association of beings. But, in TNG, we really didn't, we got him to come back once after he left. I think at least once.
The Traveler? Oh, yeah. He comes back and gets Wesley to go hitchhike, and Bev tells him to be sure and bundle up on those higher planes.
Right.
And didn't he also, wasn't he there in that, was it third season episode where Beverly's like the only person left on the ship?
Yeah.
Yep. And clearly Wes comes back at some point because he's in the wedding at in the First Contact. No, not First Contact. Nemesis.
Nemesis. Yeah.
Was it Nemesis? I forget which one. Whichever the one.
One of the next gen movies.
Yeah. Whichever one that was.
The last one. Yeah.
And so he clearly comes back. But the idea of the Travelers and Wesley being a traveler, I'm glad we got that in Prodigy. And in fact, it's one of the. I think one of my favorite parts of that second season of Prodigy was Wesley coming back as this Doctor Who-like character that we talked about at the time. And so I thought that was interesting. So those are I think those are all of the bits from TNG that I was thinking. I mean, there's more. And like you said, there are episodes.
We could always play episode killing again. There's several that and Sub Rosa goes right out.
Oh, yes.
First on the list.
And the outrageous Akona.
Yeah.
Lots of seasons 1 and 2, that's for sure. But we'll restrain ourselves. I have to say, when it comes to DS9, though, I got a lot more that I want to talk about. But Father, I'm going to let you go first again. What do you have for DS9?
I don't have a whole lot with Deep Space Nine. One thing I would have loved to have seen Jadzia Dax in on the 7th season. I was sad when they killed her off, and I know it was because Terry Farrell wanted to move on to another show. And
actually, it was a miscommunication.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, she didn't want to go. She wanted to reduce the number of episodes she was in, and the producers didn't want. Some of the producers, the higher ups, didn't want that to happen. And Ira Stephen Burr didn't know what was going on with this because she'd been in direct negotiations with the higher ups. And when he found out she's leaving, it's like, no, we could accommodate this. And yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that particular part of the backstory, but.
And I'm sad for her going too, but I really like Ezri.
I did like Ezri.
Ezri was good. Ezri was a good character, yeah. But I guess, not having Jadzia there, when they finally defeat the Dominion and everything, like there was something missing in that sense. Something else with the Deep Space Nine, I actually thought of this a little bit from the other side, something I'm glad they did not do. Something I read at one time, ran across online, was that apparently there was some thought at one point of ending the series by showing that the whole 7 seasons had been a dream in the mind of Benny Russell.
Oh no.
Benny Russell being the character that Avery Brooks plays, when they have the 1950s sci-fi magazine and everything.
Welcome to St. Elsewhere.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And so I am so glad that was not the case, because then you wouldn't, it's effectively removing Deep Space Nine from canon. And then you wonder, how is Voyager in the Delta Quadrant? Where was it they stopped off at, on their way out?
Then all of Star Trek becomes Benny Russell's
That's right. Yeah.
Or you could explain it, because you could explain it in terms of, and they didn't have this piece of the puzzle in place yet, but because Ben Sisko is part prophet, he can explore alternative realities where, and so both can be equally real.
Yeah.
They just hadn't done the setup work for that. Yeah. But I prefer Ben Sisko to Benny Russell.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
And I should mention, as we record this, Starfleet Academy's episode series, Acclamation Mill episode, has already come out. We'll talk about that next week, along with next week's episode of Starfleet Academy, or this week's. And the Cisco tribute to spoilers. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're okay with that. Spoilers. But so that's actually an interesting aspect of this, is where they've already kind of given us that closing the loop, because that was going to be, and Father, I don't mean to step on anything else you wanted to say about it, but was going to be one of my points, was closing the loop on Cisco. Any other DS9 thoughts, Father?
Not for me, no.
Okay. Jimmy?
Yeah, 3. So one of them I've already mentioned, which is I would have clearly established prophecies about the emissary at the beginning of the series, and then waited and like maybe had one episode or 2-parter every season where we have Ben has to fulfill this prophecy, or ends up fulfilling it without intending to, and we handle it different ways, and sometimes the interpretation of the prophecy is only clear in hindsight. But I would have worked that aspect of it much more, and I would have had that be the thing that convinces him to embrace his role as the emissary, because initially he's very skeptical,
right?
And so like at the end of season 1 or 2, it's like, okay, well, you say I fulfilled that prophecy, but I'm not really buying it. But then by the end of season 7, huge major or even say season 5 or 6, much bigger, much clearer prophecies, and he fulfills it in a way nobody else could plausibly do so. And he says, okay, I guess I am the emissary. So I would have made that I would have made prophecy a recurring theme throughout the series. I also would have, I have a very small one, but there's an early episode in season 1 of Deep Space Nine where it's a detective story, and Rom, I think it is, has to remember a list of names he saw, and all he can remember is the first letter of the first name on the list was a C, and then he just determines the name was Chesso. And I have no problem with the name being Chesso, but the letter C is a unique, bizarre accident to the English language because it has no value of its own. It can sound like a K, it can sound like an S, it can sound like a ch, but C has no value of its own. So pick some other letter. If it's, do not disturb the linguists in your audience by making a mistake like this.
Because he's not speaking English.
He's not speaking, yeah. They're not using English on Bajor. There was something else I was going to say, but I blanked on it. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay. I have a few. The first one is Julian Bashir's unique genetics. We find out later on in this, in the series how he's actually been genetically manipulated by his parents to be advanced and have advanced intellect and all that. I would have loved to see them. They kind of have it come out a few times, but to be a bigger part of the story, maybe if they'd introduced it earlier, we could have had it come up through the series and be more of an important aspect of who he is. And in fact, in some ways, I feel like Dr. Mbenga is an embodiment of that, because in Strange New Worlds, he's both a doctor, but he's also this former super soldier special forces guy. And that's kind of what Julian could have been. You could have developed into something a little like that.
It certainly would have made Julian less annoying for much of the series if they had introduced that earlier, because I think that was a genius move on their part. Julian was not the world's greatest character, and then they made him vastly more interesting.
They did. And related to that is the Section 31 subplot, which I think New Trek has kind of ruined. They've kind of made it more pedestrian, but the idea of this secret organization within the Federation trying to save the Federation using means which are antithetical to the Federation's credo, its principles, I think is a fascinating idea, and it's so secret that no one knows it exists. And I thought it was a really interesting idea to insert into the show, and I wish we had more of that, and we hadn't kind of ruined it with in New Trek and made it just more like it's the Federation CIA. By the time of the future comes around.
I remembered my third.
Okay.
It was I would change the setup for Cisco's ending. Because when they got right up to the end, now he had married Cassidy, he'd gotten her pregnant. He was told he would not get to spend time on Bajor. He would have nothing but suffering and so forth. And then the price is he's got to go away at the end of the series, creating this mysterious fate, which never gets paid off until kinda a little bit gets paid off in Starfleet Academy. The original plan was what Ira Stephen Burr wanted to do was he was going to have Benjamin Sisko become a god. He was just going to become a prophet. And that, was set up by the fact his mom was a prophet and things like that. And he was sent here as the emissary to serve as a bridge. He's part human, but he's also prophet. And he was going to be a prophet at the end. And that's the logical endpoint for his character. So, but when they got up to that, when they were filming the last two episodes, Avery Brooks said, I can't do that. It would play into the trope of a black man abandoning his family.
Right.
And I'm not willing to do that. And I understand that, you don't want to play into various tropes and so forth. So they modified it of I'll be back someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe yesterday, and it created this mess. So what I would do is I would change the setup so that he's not abandoning his family. Like Jake goes off to become a successful author, Cassidy, and as much as I love Cassidy, either they don't get married or certainly she doesn't get pregnant, and Ben Sisko ends up becoming a god. And that's what I would do to the Bajorans. That's what I would do with that character.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the novels, they had him come back, actually.
Yeah.
He didn't come back as captain of Deep Space Nine because Ro Laren became captain of Deep Space Nine, which I think is another interesting thing they could have done had the story continued. Although
I'm glad, because Ro Laren was originally meant to be on Deep Space Nine. She was going to be the Kira character. But I like Nana Visitor more than I like Michelle, whatever her name is. So I'm glad we got Kira Nerys.
Same. Just to wrap up my thought on Section 31, it would have been interesting to have at the end of the Dominion War a bit of a Nuremberg style accounting for, which is not really the same thing because that was for the losers, but sort of a, hey, we did some bad things, in this war, and we need to account for it. It's kind of it's an interesting open, like a bit of the hypocrisy of we win at all costs, and what does that cost the Federation to have done so? So that was one of the ideas I was thinking about there. The other
Would that
one
include
is
Cisco manipulating in some way the Romulans to enter the war.
in the pale moonlight.
Yep.
Yep, that would be one.
I would probably leave that one unaddressed. What I would modify is the fire cave sequence.
Yeah.
Where it's too physical. They've taken a metaphysical battle and reduced it to who throws the book where and who jumps into the pit when.
Right. Ducat, no. Yeah. Speaking of Cardassians, would have been interesting to see the rise of Garrick, who apparently becomes the Cardassia's president after
in spin-off media.
In spin-off media. Oh, actually, I think it's come up in New Trek at some point.
Oh.
It was, I don't remember where. I know his name is on the wall at Starfleet Academy, which is an interesting addition. All those names. But it would have been interesting to see him kind of become a leader in the new Cardassia, and how Garrick, the simple tailor, who's anything but simple, would have become something more, and how that would progress. I think that would have been an interesting aspect of Garrick's character, to see him develop in that way. So, and that's all I have for DS9. So let's move on to Voyager. Father, what do you have for Voyager?
Yeah, the biggest thing I could think of for Voyager was the two-parter, The Year of Hell. If that would have been a full season as it was originally conceived,
yeah,
I think that would have been a very interesting season. A way to look at this ship that's so far from Earth and that is now getting banged up and having to deal with tragedy on a very frequent basis. I think that would have made for an interesting season, or maybe if not even a full season, maybe a half a season or something. But a longer story arc than just the two-parter that it got. I think that would have been a very interesting set of episodes. Voyager, like a lot of the series, has a slow start. The first couple seasons are a little more difficult, or some of that I think is
a little more
Kes.
bad.
What's that?
A little more bad.
Yeah. Some of that's Kes, I think, and especially the way the Neelix and Kes situation goes along. I think once Kes is out of there, Neelix becomes a little bit easier to tolerate. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 of 9 was just so better of a character than Kes was in that point too.
All right. Jimmy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I would have either radically done something different with both Neelix and Kes, or I would have deleted Kes and gotten 7 of 9 in there early, because she is the vastly more interesting character. And as long as Kes is there, Neelix is just totally insufferable. Another thing I would shift is I would make Voyager deal with real shortages. No more infinite photon torpedoes and infinite shuttlecrafts. So I would force that onto the table. I would have the ship degrade over the course of the 7 seasons. So that like on Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, that only went on for 4 seasons, but you compare the Galactica at the beginning of the series to Galactica at the end of the series, and they're limping to Earth and barely get there. And I would do the same thing with Voyager. They're limping back to the Alpha Quadrant by the end, and they barely get back. So those are things I would do on the macro scale. But I also have, and this is actually probably certainly for me the longest standing idea that I'm mentioning on this list. I have a specific episode I would have written. And because back in the 90s when Voyager was on the air, even though I wasn't a Voyager fan, I did watch it, and I was a Star Trek fan. And at the time, Star Trek had an open solicitations policy on scripts. They don't anymore. But back then, if you had an idea for a script, you could write it and send it in, and it might get made. That's how Ron Moore got into the business. Mm-hmm. And so, and lots of others, like even in the original series, the Tholian Web was written by fans. So I developed a story idea. I never turned it into a script, but I had a story idea, and I think it would have been a banger of an episode. I think even today, all these years later, I think it would have been really good. And I described it to a guy I knew online, and 20 years later, I got in contact with him again. He reminded me of it, and he remembered the plot in more detail than I did. So I have some supporting evidence that it would have been a very compelling story. It would have been called Tomorrow's Enterprise. This is we'd had yesterday's Enterprise on the Next Generation, and in where we get a visit from a ship from the past, and it creates an alternate version of our present reality. So in this one, you've got Voyager trucking through the Delta Quadrant on its way back, and suddenly the Enterprise J shows up, and they're from the future. Things are very different in the Federation. We see races who are part of the Enterprise J crew that would be very surprising. And basically, the captain of just like you have the Rachel Garrett, Captain Picard interaction, you have a similar interaction with Captain Janeway and the future Enterprise captain. And the future Enterprise captain explains how things are very dire in the future, and we're here to intervene at a specific moment in our history to preserve the future and make things better. And we need you not to do one particular thing. And so this sets off a debate in the Voyager crew of, are they telling us the truth? Do we do the thing? Do we not do the thing? And in the end, Janeway decides not to do the thing. And after that, it is revealed that if they had done the thing, they would have gotten home instantly. And the future would have gone to hell. So they could have achieved their personal goal, but only at the cost of, billions of lives or whatever. And so to give us a hopeful note to end on, the captain of the Enterprise J reveals, and I was even thinking like maybe having Borg in the crew. I mean, not 7 of 9 Borg, but, Borg. But the captain of the Enterprise J reveals that even though you didn't get home now, you will get home. And that would have been our positive out note. And because they never said until the end that, they get home. Right. So this would have been a concrete, yes, you will get home. And that would have been a very hopeful note on a first watch through Voyager when you don't know, hey, is the series going to get canceled before that happens?
Right. That's an interesting idea. And so the just to get it straight, the crew of the J Enterprise J wanted them to do a thing.
They wanted them not to do the thing.
Not to do the thing. Okay, so they preserve the future at their own cost. Yeah, that's right in line with what you'd expect.
What would the thing have been? Was it have been something?
I'd have to see if I still have the notes. I don't know that I determined that. I determined the plot mechanics, the structure, but I don't know that I determined the details on that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Would you have had like a Ferengi captain or first officer or something, something you're kind of not expecting, right? You mentioned different races that,
Exactly. I would have, if possible, I would have also tried to introduce races that had never been seen before, but that the producers were planning to use in the future. So it's like this would be their first appearance.
Ooh, what if you had those Delta Quadrant weird hair guys from the beginning? The
Kazon?
That would, man.
Hopefully they would have discovered shampoo by that point.
So what do I have for Voyager? I had the same thing about the Year of Hell. In fact, I was thinking if the whole series had been the Year of Hell, just like you said, it's constantly having things break down. And by the end of the 7th season, this ship is probably merged with another ship or even abandoned Voyager altogether or cannibalized it into another ship or something, but just made it more realistic and had the real shortages and all that sort of stuff. I do think it would have been interesting to see Cass's whole lifespan, how they would have done, how they would have dealt with it if she hadn't left, because they set that up in the beginning, and she was only going to live so long, and she would be elderly at best by the end of the series. So how I kind of wish we'd gotten a chance to see how they would have dealt with that character.
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about before, but like they could have, in view of her lifespan, they could have married off her and Neelix early, and then we could have had Neelix weeping over her dead body before the end, and that would have been very moving.
And had their child, who would be an adult and member of the crew by then too.
Yeah,
it's like we kind of do with Naomi Wildman a little bit, where she's born and grows up really fast. So I can kind of see where they might have been thinking of that sort of thing. The Chakotay 7 relationship was interesting. They were really hinting at that by the end. Didn't really go far. But what if they had started that early? It was sort of unexpected. They were kind of hinting at the Doctor being attracted to, not even hinting. They were straight out going there with the Doctor being attracted to 7. But Chakotay and 7 as an interesting pairing by the end there. And we get 7 back in Picard.
And you've got much more potential with Chakotay and 7 than you do the Doctor and 7, because setting aside the fact he's photonic, major ethical violations because she's a patient.
Right. It's a good thing the Doctor was photonic, because a real Doctor would have been very lonely on board that ship, like the captain. So it's an interesting what might have been to see where that would have gone for them. And then I think that's all I had for Voyager, was those 3 things. There's some other things like Harry, what if Harry had been able to advance and we'd seen him, be more than the ensign he always had to be, and that sort of thing. But I think I'll stick with that. All right, we come to Enterprise. Father, what do you have for Enterprise?
Yeah, one thing that could have happened, they could have had Archer get a cat, and on some way the cat gets cancer and has to spend a whole month in sick bay. No. What I seriously would have enjoyed with Enterprise would have been if it would have had that 5th season, and if they would have done more with the Mirror Universe. I thought the Mirror Universe episodes from Enterprise were very good, and I would have loved to have seen some follow-up there. And then a little bit more, moving toward development of the Federation. That's something that could have been teased out over a number of episodes in that season, rather than being thrown into a finale that was not a great finale. And
it was a terrible finale.
Yeah. Yes.
They tried to give us closure.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And there was that talk of a series, or at least a mini series or a movie or something called Archer, where it would be the founding of the Federation. That's an interesting idea. Who knows if that'll ever happen.
I find that idea interesting. I think that, a series like that could be a good series if it's made at some point.
Yeah. Jimmy, how about you?
Okay, so change 1. Star Trek Enterprise embraces its identity as Star Trek from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. None of this, we're not Star Trek, we're Enterprise. It's like, no, forget that. This is Star Trek Enterprise. We're not hiding from it. We don't need a weird song at the beginning, So that's change number 1. Change number 2. They missed the obvious time frame for this by like 5 or 10 years. This is not a series about gallivanting around the galaxy going gee whiz for the first time. This is the founding of the Federation. So we start with the Romulan War. And this is the story of the Romulan War that leads up to the founding of the Federation. That's what the series is about. Now, you get lots of side ventures in that, because you can have a series that's fundamentally about a war. That's what
DS9.
Babylon, that's what DS9 is. That's what Babylon 5 is. This would have followed that mold, only now we're learning how the Federation started.
Right.
And it would be very interesting because, it was established that there was no obvious contact between Romulans and Federation people during the war until Balance of Terror. So that creates all kinds of covert opportunities where you have Romulans posing as Vulcans and doing stuff. And you have maybe at some point Vulcan, or you have somebody trying to infiltrate the Romulan Empire and die in. And, to get intelligence on who they are and what are they vulnerable to. So it would have fundamentally shifted what the series is about. Also, whether or not my overriding desire, which is number 2, it becomes about the Romulan War. I also would have done a smaller thing with a number 3, which is I would have showed us some doomed ships. Because one of the things that when we're going around, especially in the original series, but to an extent in TNG and maybe even DS9, they revisit situations where some ship vanished at this planet 200 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever. Show us those ships.
Right.
Even if they don't make a big deal out of it in the dialogue, okay, Captain Archer is saying hello to the captain of the newly commissioned USS Archon. And you just know this, even if they don't point it out, this ship is going to go to Beta 3 and end up badly. Frankly, it would be fascinating to see that story, and how terrifying it would be. I just haven't haven't devoted the thought to figure out how could you tell that from within an Enterprise framework. Right. But show us the doomed ships that get lost and that get crashed and that have all these bad things happen to them.
Something similar to that is have the Enterprise join the search for the lost Zephram Cochrane. And then have them find him, but let him go because he asked, "Just let me go. I'm going off on my own."
Yeah,
and that would be a really interesting. And then get James Cromwell to play him. He was still in. Actually, he was in a few Enterprise episodes as other characters, I think.
No, he was in it. He was in file footage as Zephram Cochrane.
Yeah. That would have been an interesting episode of Enterprise. Yeah, that's true. I like those ideas, Jimmy. Mine are pretty basic and straightforward. Either I would have resolved the temporal Cold War earlier or not done it at all. But honestly, I feel like the temporal Cold War was a bad idea.
Or it might have been possible to restructure it in such a way that it became interesting.
Yes. It just it kind of interfered and it wasn't enough of the focus to really remain interesting and to give you a sense of resolution of anything.
Future guy in the head of the opposite forces in the temporal Cold War was in fact planned to be Archer in an alternate future. So I think there's potential to make it interesting, but the temporal Cold War was not something the writers initially envisioned. It was like something that some of the higher ups, maybe even the studio, demanded.
Right. Because it was in there from the beginning, right? We had that. It was the Suliban were pretty early. And then the other one that kind of got dropped was the Xindi War, which we were starting to get to in the 4th season. And that we were just starting to really, most people agree, Enterprise was just starting to get its legs under it, and that 4th season was really starting to do something interesting when it got the axe. And so the Xindi arc would have been a very interesting arc to finish out there. So that couple of lost opportunities there. And as far as character arcs, relationships, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is that T'Pol and Trip, how that would have worked out as an early Vulcan human relationship, that would have been an interesting aspect of what would have happened with them. Would they have stayed together, or what if they'd split? And it's kind of interesting.
And of course we haven't mentioned the obvious thing. I mean, we haven't made it explicit, but I think we've all moved around the idea. The obvious thing they need to do is not kill Trip.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. That was shocking.
Especially in such a stupid way.
Yes. All right. So that wraps up our classic series. Anything else you want to say about what might have been, what could have been, what we would have changed, Father? Any last thoughts?
No, I don't think I had anything else ready for that. Yeah.
Jimmy, how about you?
Nope.
So, just as if I had a last thought on it, is this exercise kind of helps me to think about what is it about Star Trek that we love? Where is it at its best? And and I feel like it's at its best when it kind of resolves its ideals.
Don't spoil episode 500, dude.
Well, maybe this will be the discussion of episode 500.
That's just 2 years away.
Yeah. When is Star Trek at its best? And I think that might be something we could explore further in episode 500. Is Star Trek at its best when it forces people to live with consequences, when it resolves storylines, or when it leaves us to consider what might have been, and maybe all of those things. So I do encourage listeners to write in with their ideas. What would you have done? What would you have loops closed, characters changed, episodes dropped? That's always a popular one. So let us know. I'll give you all the contact info at the end of the episode. But first, we do have feedback on some recent episodes. On Starfleet Academy, Vitus Reflux, that episode, we got some feedback from Fozzy43430 on YouTube, who writes, I watched the first 3 of Starfleet Academy, and that's enough for me. First, I felt like I was watching a co-production of Hallmark and Star Trek with a deb of 90210. It seemed I kept getting pushed too far to suspend my belief. A Klingon of any kind admitting for no apparent reason, I like watching birds. Then cadets having to do surgery to save a life when there's a doctor. He's a computer program. I can run more than one instance of programs in Linux right now. Did all the doctors die in the burn?
Yeah, that one is...
It goes back to Voyager.
It goes back, well, and it goes back to Hollywood lack of understanding of how computers work. But they had established that you can really kind of only run one doctor at a time, unless by the whatever century this is, they've overcome that technological hurdle. There was something else that can you reread the first part of that message?
So it was like Hallmark, Star Trek, and 90210, and then the Klingon Loving Birds.
Oh, that was it.
Yep.
That was I don't have a problem with that because they did the same thing with Worf. That's why Worf likes prune juice and declares it a drink for warriors. It's a surprising minor subversion of the Klingon trope.
Right.
And they've done that with other Klingons, including main characters, and that's why we get this marvelous scene in Deep Space Nine where Jadzia lists all of Worf's weird contradictions and declares him to be complex.
That's right. Yeah.
The other thing I would say on that is the 4th and especially 5th episodes of Starfleet Academy get better than what we saw in the first.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. You might want to check them out.
Or just listen to us.
Yeah, that's right. Keep listening, even if you're not watching. And then on our discussion, Vox in Excelso, let's see, Sir Cadsalot writes on YouTube, with the number of habitable planets they come by on the regular in Star Trek, how hard would it be for some Klingons to find a new homeworld they could settle without help from anyone else? Even if they were out a Viking, as it were, we've seen plenty of planets containing only a small village of a few hundred people, small enough that you could colonize most of the planet's surface and not even notice them. A planet big enough to have Earth-like gravity has a lot of free real estate.
Depending on how dense the core of the planet is. But this doesn't make a lot of sense. I accept it as just science fiction trope writing from Hollywood.
Right. Yeah, if you dig too deep in that, it was one of the first things I thought about when like the Klingons don't have a homeworld. Pick one.
Space, as some famous science fiction franchise once said, space is big. I mean, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, unimaginably big it is.
All right. So that's our feedback. Thank you, everyone who sends in feedback. We really do appreciate it. Now, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Megan F., Patrick W., Paul B., Stephen B., and Carla C. Their generous donations at GiveStarQuest.com make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting GiveStarQuest.com. So that's it from us. We would love to get your feedback on our 400th episode and what might have been, what could have been. You can do that by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Watch the Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next 2 new episodes of Starfleet Academy, or at least next since the last time we talked about it. Until then, Father Jason Tyler, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Tom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you. Live long and prosper. And since we're doing what might have been, I'm going to change my Vulcan hand salute to the Andorian hand salute I thought of as a child, and wish you live long and prosper that way, too.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, as Guinan says in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise, this is a reality that shouldn't exist.